would like to thank you for inviting me to give this talk. Changhua Falshi and Changjai Falshi, thank you very much for inviting me. I think that this talk is one in a series by which we commemorate Shifu's teaching. And that is another reason why I'm very happy to participate in it. This is, of course, our way to express gratitude to Shifu, and also I'm happy to talk for the CMC community, because that is the place in which I started my practice with Shifu a long time ago. So there is a lot of memories from that place and people, of course. So for that reason, I'm also very happy to share my thoughts with you today. And the topic for this talk, I'm sure you already know, it is self-confidence and no self-confidence. I think this is a quite important topic, and I will tell you now a few reasons why I choose to talk about it. So the first reason is the fact that in my practice and in my teachings, I met a number of people who actually suffer from a lack of self-confidence. And I think it is very common among the people who come on the path of Chan. Not just, it is not just the case for those who practice Chan, but I think generally people who are looking how to help themselves and who are looking for a spiritual path, they are somehow sensitive, more sensitive maybe than others. And for that reason, sometimes this lack of self-confidence is what they suffer from. The second reason for choosing this topic is also something I experienced with a number of people who practice at the very beginning, is that there is somehow misunderstanding. Very often there is a misunderstanding about teaching on selflessness. And for that reason, people practice in a way which is not very healthy, considering the fact that they lack this self-confidence, and thinking that they have to enter into a process of deconstructing the self is not very healthy, is not very good thing to do. So that is the second reason why I choose this topic. And the third one is, of course, the fact that self-confidence on the path of Chan is a very, very important precondition actually for any success in practice. So these three reasons, I think, are the ones on the basis of which I decided to talk about self-confidence and non-self-confidence tonight. Sorry. So let me start by saying that in today's society, this problem of lack of self-confidence and self-respect is a very common problem. It is a common psychological problem, if I can say so, and many people suffer from it. There is, of course, many different reasons why it is so. I can just generally say that the fast way of living, the tensions and anxiety, and of course the superficiality and alienation. These are all some features of or characteristics of modern day living, and all this together makes a very good basis for negative emotions to arise, and also we are sometimes very critical to ourselves, and also we can have a lot of expectations also. So all this together creates somehow this feeling of lack of self-confidence, and I think that when we are talking about a lack of self-confidence, that what we primarily have there is actually the view which exaggerates somehow our limitations and our well, in a negative way, the qualities and the capabilities and the potential which we all have. So from the perspective of that view, we feel limited, we feel without certain qualities, we feel lack of those qualities in ourselves, and the lack of capabilities, and we don't see any potential really in ourselves to grow and to develop. So this is how people who have this lack of confidence or self-confidence actually feel about themselves. This is how they see themselves. This is the picture they created about themselves. And from the other side, that kind of insecurity, and it is basically insecurity, we can see that that these last 2 years of a pandemic and last 2 years of a global crisis, which is not just a health crisis, but includes many other things, did not help in any way to build somehow self-confidence. Quite the contrary. And I think it's quite clear that to be self-confident is actually precondition for having a healthy relationship with ourselves and healthy relationships with others. But it is also a precondition for achieving any goals which we have in our life. And it is precondition to be successful in whatever field of our activities. So when this self-confidence is present, it is based on our positive experiences, and it is based on certain capabilities which we have, and also the skills which we have. So being aware of those capabilities, of those skills, and be successful in using them. This is how usually people build the self-confidence. But what we have to know is that this kind of self-confidence is not something which is fixed, something which lasts, something which is unchanging. Because even if we are quite capable and skilled in many ways, sooner or later we will experience failure. We will experience being unsuccessful. And in this world, things are not always going in the way we want it to go. So, and also, even the people who are quite efficient in certain areas of life and successful, they are usually not in other areas of life, and they feel insecure and not self-confident when they have to deal with issues which are outside the field of their competence, and we all have to deal with those issues in life. But the same thing we can say for lack of confidence also. There is nothing really fixed and solid in that feeling of not being confident or having a lack of confidence. So that feeling is, or that view about ourselves, that picture of we created of ourselves, is also not fixed and constant and solid. It changes, and it is possible for it to change. So I think that is very important to understand at the very beginning, that we can either have this lack of self-confidence for various reasons, of which all are really changeable. And we can also have self-confidence, but that self-confidence is also not something which is fixed and the same forever. Once we have it for forever. It is not really like that. And the reason why it is not like that, it is because all those conditions actually are based on continual change of causes and conditions which are at the base of those state or those feelings. Well, saying that about lack of self-confidence or no self-confidence, I think that it is also important to understand that in both cases, or generally talking about the confidence, we have this extreme, which are possible. What are the extremes? So if we are overcritical to ourselves, if we are drawn somehow to this negative thinking about ourselves, if we are all the time looking for the mistakes which we do in our life, then that can lead not just to lack of self-confidence, but that can easily lead to depression, which is a much worst state of mind. So this is a one extreme, and another extreme is once we become overconfident. So being overconfident is also something which lacks realistic view of ourselves. Sorry. So this extreme of being overconfident can actually lead to arrogance, and being arrogant is, I think, not very nice condition to be in, not just for ourselves in a long term looking, but also for other people who are around us. You know, the arrogance is the view which is based on an idea that we are better than other people, that we are more successful than other people, that we are other people, that we are more capable than other people. And it is based on this strong difference between ourselves and others. And also it is based on an unrealistic view of ourselves. So we can be confident, and we can be realistically confident, but we can be also confident, which is somehow imagine confidence, imagine self-confidence, and there are no real support for feeling confident. So as you can see, it is a quite a complex issue, and we can have all these varieties of ways in which we look at ourselves, the ways in which we see, which we are seeing ourselves. And well, this is a result again of many things, but generally speaking, having an ego is always cause of either exaggerating or how to say, decreasing or minimizing something. From the perspective of ego, we are rarely actually realistic and seeing things as they are. So for this reason, I think that in this way we can actually think about those two terms, lack of self-confidence and having a self-confidence. So from the Buddhist perspective, I said earlier that one of the reasons I choose this topic is this misunderstanding which very often arises when beginners, for example, hear about the teaching of selflessness in Buddhism, and they suffer from a lack of self-confidence. Then they can actually start somehow or they enter into this process of deconstructing the self, and that can be quite dangerous, and they can hurt themselves by doing so. So the first thing what we have to understand about this teaching of selflessness, which is a very, very important teaching, about the very basic teaching of Buddhism, and something which differs Buddhism from all other religions or teachings. But the Buddhism does not deny the self in its functional aspect. So to think that we have to be selfless somehow from the very beginning, or that we have to emulate this selflessness from the very beginning of practice, is a huge mistake, actually. And as I said, we can hurt ourselves by doing so. So what Buddhism is saying really is that there is a misunderstanding of the self, because we all have something, how can I call it, self-awareness. We all have a self-awareness, and this is something which we developed through the evolution. And without this self-awareness, we wouldn't be where we are now. So we wouldn't be able even to organize our life without this self-awareness. We wouldn't be able to live a normal life without this function of the self. But what is the main idea of selflessness in Buddhism is that that attachment to this self and seeing this self as something which exists separately from others and from the world in general, that is a mistake. That is actually kind of a mental construction which is created and which has a very, very deep roots in ourselves. So when we are talking about selflessness, that does not mean that that we don't have our own individual characteristics and which can be unique somehow and so on. This is not negating our individuality in any way, but it is actually, as I said, understanding that once we add to this self-awareness this idea of separateness, or being separate from others, and once we become attached to it, then all our problem starts there. And we can't, well, it's wrong to say that then all the problem starts, because this is not something we intentionally do. This is a very deep roots in ourselves. And in Buddhism, we understand that we are born with it. So it comes from our previous lives. And but anyway, it is a cause of all human suffering, this idea of being separate, this dualistic way of seeing and being in reality. It is a really cause of all our troubles. So for that reason, yes, it is very important to understand what the self really is. It is important to see directly what this self is and discover what's in Buddhism called the selflessness, the absence of self as we imagine it to be. But before we can do that, we first have to consolidate ourselves. We first have to find out what this self is really. We can't get rid of it without knowing what it is. And trying to do that at the very beginning in a very unskillful way is, I think, quite dangerous, and the way in which we can harm ourselves a lot. So in Chan, our first task is actually to consolidate this self and to experience the self, to find out what this self is, and to experience the self in its various forms, so to say, through practice. And only then we can see its unsubstantiality. Sorry for my English. And be free from this dualistic way of perceiving ourselves and the world.
Anyone has any feedback? While we are waiting for Zarko, the most important part is no self-confidence.
Sounds like you have to know yourself, right? That's what he landed. Basically, you have to really know yourself in all aspects to be able to then actually to forget yourself. Yes. And to build, I guess that's the base, right? You got to know yourself to build the confidence.
I'm very sorry.
No problem. We are having fun.
You know, we have a huge snowstorm here with a very strong wind, and today twice it happened that we lost electricity, and for a moment it happened just before. And then, of course, the Wi-Fi signal is lost, and everything is lost. But it seems to me that you did continue my talk on your own, which is very good. Maybe I don't even need to continue.
So please, we just like just feeling the break.
Okay. All right, so where did I stop? Well, yes, I just wanted to say that it's very important to correctly understand the teaching of selflessness, and if we have this lack of self-confidence when we begin our practice, we have to build that self-confidence, and we have to do it in a right way. Of course, this trust in ourselves, or being confident in practice, is generated actually in two ways. The one is through understanding the teaching, to become familiar with the basic principles of teaching on the one hand, and on the other hand, which is a little bit more difficult but more important, is through the practice itself. And as a lack of self-confidence, as actually is the case with all negative emotions, there is this kind of fixed view that we are as we are and nothing can be really changed. So when we begin practice, it is very important to create this space in which we will be able to actually realize that things are changing. And not just that things are changing, but we can actually make a change. We can change by practicing. And I will give you a very simple example. You know, when you sit in meditation and you find yourself in a physical state which is not maybe good, if you find a lot of tensions in your body, and if you start using the methods of relaxation, and then you realize that you can actually change that you can become relaxed through practice. It is a great insight, because if the small change is possible, the big change is possible as well. And on the basis of that, we can see that it is not just that we can change the state of our body, condition of our body, but we can also change the state of our minds as well. You know, you might be at the beginning very restless or scattered, but through using the methods in a correct way, we can see that our mind can become collected and can become concentrated and calm. And I think that this is a very important experiences, because they show us that that not just that methods as such and Dharma as such are something in which we can have confidence, but we can also can have confidence in ourselves, because we are the ones who using the methods and by studying the Dharma, actually in our own experience produce this change. And this is how the self-confidence is built through the practice. But of course, in the beginning, we need this faith that change is possible, that enlightenment is possible, that teaching is telling us truth about ourselves and the life, the nature of life, and that methods are efficient, because all the generations of practitioners through the history have been using this teaching and this method in order to alleviate their suffering and become free. So initially we need that kind of knowledge, and we need that kind of trust and the faith, if you want me to call it so. But this is not enough, and only once we start to experience in our own practice the benefits of practice, and once we see that change is possible, then we start to gain this self-confidence, and without it, the path is really not possible. Now, when we repeat the 4 great Bodhisattva vows, you know, in the front of these huge, enormous idea of saving all beings and mastering all approaches to Dharma, and so on, we feel so small. We feel so small and incapable, and how we can even think about achieving it or entering into this path for achieving it. So instead of feeling so small, if we simply turn ourselves to what is right here and now, if we turn to ourselves, and if we continue to use the methods and the views, principles of practice, we will be able to see that change is possible. And as I said earlier, if the small change is possible, the big change is possible as well. And that is how we can step by step build our confidence and progress on the path. But of course, at the beginning, I was talking about this lack of self-confidence and self-confidence in everyday life, in lives of people who are not practicing, who are not on the path. But we bring all those attitudes with us when we start practicing as well. So if in normal life we had a lack of self-confidence, this is how we begin our path, with a lack of self-confidence. If we had a self-confidence, we bring that self-confidence in. And in both cases, we transform those how can I say it? Those initial view of ourselves through the practice. So if we start with a lack of self-confidence, we can overcome that. We can build self-confidence, but not the ordinary self-confidence. We have to make a difference between ordinary self-confidence, which I described earlier, which is based on some capabilities, some skills, and so on. But here, on the part of Chan, when we are talking about self-confidence, we are talking about confidence which is built on a right understanding, which is built on moral principles, and which is built on having a clear vision of our progress and a clear direction in our life. And that kind of self-confidence is not so dependent on experiences of failure and the change in general. We can be successful and not successful, and we won't lose this self-confidence if it is based on the right understanding and the right principles. And I think that is very very important to understand. But sometimes even on the path, even on the path, we can have these extremes present, which I mentioned also earlier. So sometimes even among the people who are practicing for a long time, we can see the arrogance present. And that is very sad thing to see, because that is well, not very nice attitude to have. especially because it should be quite the opposite. The longer someone practices, the more selfless that person has to become somehow, less selfish and less obsessed with self. But unfortunately, that is also something which from time to time we can meet and experience. And in Buddhist psychology, this arrogance is usually presented as a pride. And in Abhidharma, they have like a 7 kinds of pride, or 7 ways in which pride can manifest. So I'm sure if you did not come across that studying the Buddhism, studying the Buddha Dharma, it is quite interesting to see that the pride can manifest in so many ways, and it is a result, of course, of a deep insight and the deep analysis of various mental states. But it also shows how important that was, how important was to understand the pride in its various forms in which it can appear, because it is a very difficult to recognize. It's very difficult to recognize the arrogance in ourselves when it manifests, and it is even more difficult to let go of it, because in the context of teaching, it turns into form which is, how can I say it, which is hidden in a way. It's very subtle, and it's hidden, and it is hidden under, well, it's based on all false arguments about how successful we are in our practice and so on. So it's somehow connected with the Dharma, So in Buddhism, there is a metaphor about grabbing the snake for the tail. The Dharma is in this metaphor a snake, which can be very useful. We can use the snake poison as a medicine and so on. But if we grab the snake by the tail, the snake will bite us, and it's very dangerous. So in the same way, if we approach the Dharma in a wrong way, it can be quite spiritually dangerous for ourselves and for our development and understanding and so on. So I think it is important to mention that because it can happen to all of us. It can happen to all of us that we become too proud because we practice a lot, become too proud for studying a lot and thinking that our understanding is very deep and that we understand more than other people do. We practice more than other people do, and this is how this kind of this kind of arrogance can be easily built without us noticing it. And it can have a lot of negative consequences for ourselves and, of course, for our Dharma friends and people around us as well. So it seems to me that I heard you talking in the meantime, as I was trying to establish the signal again. You continue to talk about this process of experiencing the self in its various forms, if I understood correctly. That Shifu describes wonderfully as in a very, very simple way, going from scattered mind to concentrated mind to unified mind and then to no mind. And it is a very good way of presenting actually this various form of self, and being scattered definitely is a situation in there is a more than one self there present. We at the same time want something and we don't want something, so it's a very contradictory situation, very confused situation, and definitely not the position for starting deconstructing the self, because there is nothing to deconstruct really at that point. So we have to consolidate the self. We have to concentrate our mind, experience concentration, experience unification of the mind, and then we can see all this range of the ways in which self appears in our experience. And then we can develop this deeper understanding of what the self really is, and in what way it obstructs us, and how it obstructs us, and why it is obstructing and creating suffering, being cause of suffering. And only then we can really approach the no mind or no self. But it is very important to enter into this process and to gather all these preconditions which we need. One is definitely understanding of the Dharma, understanding of the path, having this vision of how to progress on the path. That is very important. But on the other hand, it is a practice itself. And through the practice, our self-confidence will develop. And the deeper we are going into the path, the greater this self-confidence will be. So experiencing unification in that sense is, I think, very, very important on the path, because then we know this self very clearly through all this process up to that point. We experience it in many different ways, and our understanding of the self is quite deep. And only then we can really let go of it. It is very unrealistic to expect that we can let go of the self before we really develop self-confidence, and before we are firmly positioned on the path. Well, I think that is. I think there is another. I'm going a little bit back and forth now, but I think there is another important aspect in our practice which we have to consider, and that is accepting ourselves. It is. I don't think it's really possible to develop self-confidence if we don't accept ourselves. If we don't accept even our lack of self-confidence. And I think that is also something which we learn at the very beginning in meditation practice. So whatever we're facing on our pushing, in whatever state of body and mind we find ourselves, the first step is actually to accept, to acknowledge to ourselves, to face, and then to accept. I think that's very important. And that is very often present. We would like things to be different from what they are at the moment, and this is how we create this huge gap in ourselves, and that can be very obstructing as well. So it's very important to accept our condition and seeing it as our working material, so to say, something which can be very useful, and not seeing it only in a negative way. So whether we are tense and scattered and full of wandering thoughts or whatever, this is it. This is our condition at the moment, and this is something which we have to open to that condition and accepting that condition, and then of course knowing how to use the methods and how to have a certain beneficial attitudes in our practice, and primarily maybe seeing all that in a light of impermanence. I think these are ingredients for this inner transformation, and very, very necessary ingredients for this inner transformation. Unfortunately, I see that my time is almost running out. So I would like just to give you some practical advice or steps maybe, which are important in my opinion for building a self-confidence, beside what I already said, and that is a good understanding of the Dharma and practice, regular practice. What we can do in order to build our self-confidence is the first thing is our posture. I think it's very important. Mind and body are very much connected, and if our posture is not very good, that will affect our mind. And the lack of self-confidence can be easily seen in the way we are holding our body. So if we change that, if we are making our spine straight, and in sitting and in walking and in all condition, that will definitely help to build a self-confidence. The other thing, I'm now just going fast through this because there is no more time. Although any of those can be explained more in detail. So the other thing is also physical and mental as the first one. So the exercising. I think the exercising is very, very important for building self-confidence. And especially if we connect that exercises with the meditation, if it is meditation in movement, that will be very, very helpful. The third, not necessarily in that order, is relaxation. You know, relaxation is extremely important, and I could say it's the beginning and end of the path. Although people think about relaxation as something not very important in relation to advanced methods of meditation, but actually, it is the beginning and the end of the path. Being relaxed into our natural state of mind, that is the end of how to say, that is relaxation seen as a very realization of the path itself. So another thing which is of course very important is not to think about past, not to think about the future, but living in the present moment, being here and now. And in the same time, being realistic about our goals, not having expectations which are unrealistic, and knowing our abilities, our capabilities, and not trying to do something which is above our capabilities at the moment. But in that sense, being realistic, you know, taking the small steps, doing what we can do. And this is how we build the self-confidence. And this is it. My time ran out. Is it? I have to ask the.
We would like, you know, if you have time, that we would like to invite you again. I know you are very busy. This is Changhua again.
Okay, Changhua.
I represent the CMC community to thank you very much for your insight, even though we have accidental break, but we enjoy your talk, and I hope that you can give us more Dharma sharing in any way in the future.
Thank you very much. If anybody has a question, have a question, I have some time. If you have a time, although your 1 hour plan is already.
Well, we have open discussion after the talk, so no problem. So
excuse me, Ruth, please unmute yourself. You can ask your question. Thank you.
I think my husband also has a question. Thank you so much, Zarko. This is kind of where I've been practicing for a long time, and it took me a real long time to realize that I stayed in a frozen state of failure, not fear of failure, just I'm a failure in everything I did. And it took me a real long time to face that, because I came to the cushion trying to alleviate all of my suffering. And the more that I tried, the more suffering I just piled on top of myself. And so I've been really questioning motivation, like, what is my motivation? And I think that you kind of answered all the questions, but like my motivation now is just, like you said, it's just look at the self. And I guess coming from a like really low state, I don't want to go to an arrogant state, obviously. So just trying to figure out, how do you stay in the middle? Just, I guess it's just continue to practice, but like the motivation behind it. Like, it's funny you mentioned exercise. I just realized I looked at myself and said, I need to exercise, but not to look better, just to feel better. You know, like there could be that like small thing that says, hey, you need to look better, to feel better, be better, but in actuality, it's just to feel better inside my body. And relaxation is something that is very hard for me to achieve. Yet I keep showing up to practice and I keep sitting. But could you speak to motivation?
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, yeah, I think we should take a small steps. We should take a small steps in whatever we do, and be realistic about it. Not having huge expectations, and motivation. Well, motivation comes from seeing the practice as a medicine and seeing the need for that medicine. You know, if we know that we are suffering in various ways, that we have can be stressed or tensed or worried in whatever way that suffering we experience, we would be quite interested for freeing ourselves. And if we see the practice as a medicine, something by which we can heal ourselves, then we won't lack this motivation, you know. And as I said earlier, motivation, I think, rises in the same way as the confidence rises. The more confident we become, the more motivated we become. But it is also, you know, motivation is a kind of energy. It is something which depends, of course, on faith. It depends on many other factors, but it is also well, how can I say it? Wish for something which is beneficial, for something which is helpful, something which can help ourselves and others as well. You know, this is like a proper motivation in practice, because however that motivation at the beginning can be very self-oriented. You know, we can see very soon that that self-oriented motivation becomes kind of obstruction, you know. And once we start to practice with the idea of helping not just ourselves but others as well, then that motivation is gaining enormous strength, and then the confidence is present also. And yeah, I think it's very important to bring together all these how can I say, proper ingredients or a condition or a preconditions for successful practice.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I can follow that up, thank you, Zarko. Good to see you again. Mike, you touched upon it about conditions to build self-confidence or not. Would you be able to mention something from the teacher's perspective, like in any Sangha, like Shifu himself taught to thousands, millions, but a handful of Dharma hairs propped up. That happens in each little groups like this. The teacher's role in building self-confidence of the students. Would you be able to mention something about that?
Well, definitely there is a role, important role of the teacher in building that self-confidence in people. but it is, I think, quite as similar with raising the children. You know, maybe some of our lack of self-confidence comes from the way we were brought up, from the society in which we live, and so on. So these are like a complex conditions. But in a process of teaching, you know, I think that first of all, it is important to see that someone has a lack of confidence, and then once you see that someone has this lack of confidence, then there are various ways in which the person can be encouraged and helped in building self-confidence. Yeah, this is a important. The role of teacher is important, but it is not how can I say, decisive. I think that it has to come from us, from inside. We have to be willing to participate in that process. I don't know. Does that satisfy you as an answer?
Maybe, because the blessing of the teacher and that support, I think that's what you mentioned, support in having the wisdom of encouraging a student. I think the key word was encouragement for me.
Encouragement, yes, the encouragement, definitely. And there is a various way in which we can encourage people. You know, I think this, the quality of interaction is important. And also, you know, the Dharma friends, it's not just the teacher, but the Dharma friends. We can support each other and help each other, and in that way, all together build this self-confidence that comes from the, you know, idea that we are on a right path, and that we are doing what is right and good for us and others. And it is difficult to be alone and practice alone. You know, that is quite difficult. And for that reason, we all need Sangha. We all need Sangha. We all need to come together and to practice together, encourage each other to practice. And so these are like outside conditions, but nevertheless, they are also important in the process.
Thank you, Zarko. Thank you, CMC.
And thank you. And Lois, you can ask your question. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes, I was on a long dirt road in the north of BC. And as I was walking, I had a very heavy pack sack. I was a little tired, and I saw a large snake in the middle of the road, you know, stretched out flat, dead. And I thought, well, it's a big snake. And I thought maybe it's a rattler and I can get the rattle. So I picked up the tail. And as I picked up the tail, the thick snake was quite alive and went for my nose. So I dropped it, and I can't believe how fast I could run with that heavy pack. And that leads me to, I had been meditating, practicing in a different way for a long time, but one of the things that I'd read so much about was enlightenment, how this you make a breakthrough and your whole life changes. And then over the years, I realized that I was not grabbing the head. And then I think when we start working and understand that there's no soul, there's no being, there's no person, in a way, when we have studied how can we have enlightenment if we don't have a life, a person, a being, as the Buddha said. And I must be thinking that perhaps enlightenment is true, but maybe it's more like an enticement to come in and to start really understanding and to work on the self. Because I think it was what Dogen said, is that to study Chan is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to see enlightenment in all things. So that means that there can't be a personal enlightenment that's a thing. And I've been puzzling about this for the last 2 weeks, and I don't have an answer, and I'm not sure if I even got the question right, but that's what I have to offer.
Well, Dogen said it all. I don't think I need to elaborate on that, you know. Yeah, it's a kind of contradiction in itself, you know, idea that I can become enlightened. You know, it is kind of contradiction in itself, because in enlightenment everything is there, as Shifu very often said, but not this me, I. You know, there is no this self-attachment there. But there is a wisdom. And there is a also, as I said earlier, our unique characteristic as a being. You know, our individuality can be still present. You know, we are what we are, who we are. But in the same time, we can see ourselves and the world differently. And of course, we act in the world differently, not creating suffering, neither for ourselves nor for others. So enlightenment is like a big idea, and something which can create a lot of wandering thoughts in meditation. So we have this potential to be free. We have this potential to be free, and we should do everything in our power to free ourselves and to help others to be free. But as I said earlier, there is not much use. It's good to have a vision. It's good to have understanding about the path, about the goal, everything. But then we take small steps. We take steps which are in accordance with our capabilities at the moment, and that is very important. And then, as mind is not fixed, you know, as there is nothing fixed in the mind, really, the change can happen. This turn in the seat of consciousness, as it is called in Yogacara Buddhism, can happen if we practice correctly and if we are letting go of our attachments in life.
Thank you, Zarko, and thank you for your talk as well.
You're welcome.
And thank you. And hello, Zarko. And there is a question in the chat box. And the YT Pusa asks, hello, Zarko. I have 2 questions. The first one is, will keeping the precepts leading to enlightenment? And would you please describe the Buddha nature relationship with awareness? It is the first question. The second one, that is back to the word's reality. In the case of Russia invading Ukraine, if we were the Ukrainians, should we pick up the weapon to shoot Russian soldiers? They are difficult questions for me. And so would you like to answer those two questions, please? Thank you.
Oh, well, I'll try. They are quite difficult, difficult questions. So the first one, will keeping the precepts lead to enlightenment? Well, you know, the precepts are kind of a precondition for having a stability of mind. You know, if we won't follow precepts, if we act in life in a way which creates suffering for ourselves and others, then there is no possibility of us having a very stable mind in that condition. So through the precepts, we actually minimize the suffering in our life, and also we build the web of good relationship with the people around us, the web which is then supporting our good intentions, you know, and our aspirations. And in that sense, the precepts is leading to enlightenment, I can say so. Precept is leading to enlightenment, but you can't achieve enlightenment only through the precepts. Precepts actually, in the beginning, we see them as some kind of a discipline, but they are based really on deep insight into the nature of life and nature of reality. Precepts are there because we know that in reality everything is interconnected. We are not separated, and therefore, in that sense, the precepts are expression of enlightenment. Also, it's not just something which leads towards enlightenment, but they are expressions of enlightenment. The persons who are enlightened, they don't need to keep precepts because they naturally do so. So I think that's what I can say about this relationship. And Buddha nature relationship with awareness. Now there is no relationship there. They're one. You know, the awareness is a Buddha nature. The awareness which is free from self-centeredness, that is the Buddha nature. And your second question, back to this world's reality. So where we are so far. Okay. In the case of Russia invading Ukraine, if we were the Ukrainians, should we pick up the weapon to shoot Russian soldiers? Well, that's a very difficult question, really. And I think it's not really possible to give a general answer to that. On the one hand, everybody, every sentient being has a right to protect themselves. You know, every sentient being has this right to protect themselves. And we also, as a human being, we have a right to protect ourselves. And in that sense, our motivation in fighting is not to hurt others, is not to kill others, but to protect ourselves and protect our families and other people around us who are attacked. You know, so from that sense, you know, to protect your country is how to say, appropriate. But on the individual level, if you decide that you won't hurt anyone despite others won't hurt you, you won't defend yourself, that is right also. That is right also. That is like an ideal. But it is a very, very tough question. You know, there is this situation in which for example, you can save 1,000 people by killing one person who is ready to kill this 1,000. What would you do? It's almost similar question, because we are using in defending ourselves, we are violent as well. But what is the motivation for that violence? That is, I think, the most important. And the question I mentioned is usually the question which is brought up with the ideal of bodhisattva. Will a bodhisattva do such a thing? The bodhisattva who has an ideal of compassion, of great compassion. Would that person kill that one person if that will save the 1,000 others? You know, and the answer is usually yes, because bodhisattva is ready to go to hell and to continue his practice there, you know. But well, these are all hypothetical questions in a sense, and I was in a situation. I was in a situation when the war in Croatia was to have this serious thought about whether to go in the war or not to go in the war. And my decision was to do some humanitarian work instead. The help in every other possible way in which people can be helped, but not to take the gun and going to fighting and killing people. But as long as we live in the world as it is, the world of ignorance and greed and hatred, we will be exposed to such a situation, and each of us has to find the answer to that. In Buddha Dharma, we try to deal with the situation with wisdom and compassion. So what is wise to do in a certain situation, and is it a compassionate? It is motivated by compassion, is what really matters. I don't know whether I answer your question, but yeah, it's a difficult one.